Kasha Egan. I am the chair of the committee. As you're aware, during the state of emergency in place during the COVID-19 pandemic, no physical location will be provided for the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting. The meeting will instead be live streamed from remote locations. We want to remind everyone that that as you arrive to a virtual meeting, you have been muted your mic except for the committee members. As instructed in the agenda, those who called or emailed us in advance to let us know your name, contact number, and agenda item you wish to speak about will be recognized first. Before the Bricktown Urban Design Committee votes on each item, I will ask if any members of the public wish to speak. Anyone speaking will be given 3 minutes to speak. Since you are muted, when I call on you, please unmute yourself. On a phone, you will press let's say *6, and then state your name, number, your name and address for the record before you speak. On a desktop or laptop, you will hover your cursor over the microphone icon to remove the diagonal red line that's in the bottom left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. If we lose our connection for this meeting, the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting on Wednesday, June 10th, 2020 at 9 a.m. by video conference. This meeting agenda and all attached documents are located at okc.gov. Jennifer, will you please call the roll?
Thank you so much. Committee member Kasha Egan.
Present.
Committee member Sandino Thompson.
Present.
Committee member Ophelio Cancio.
Present.
Committee member Jonathan Dodson. Committee member Richard McCown.
Present.
Committee member Ava Scaramucci.
Present.
Committee member Brent Wall.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Fantastic. Okay, so it's been a little while. So item number 2 on our agenda is approval of minutes. There are March 11th, 2020 minutes. Would anyone like to motion for approval?
Motion for approval, Avis.
Second.
It looks like Sandino is moved for the action, and Sandino moved to approve. Avis, if you want a second, I think you need to push a button, or someone else in the committee needs to push a button on our.
Get it?
Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Looks like everybody still needs to vote. Ophelia, Jonathan is present, and then Avis. I think he'll still have another button to press there, Avis. There we go. Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved. Item number 3, cases withdrawn, none. Item number 4, continuance request, none. Item 5, consent docket, none. And that gets us to cases for individual consideration. I'll be handing this item over to Sandino since I'm involved with the project as part of the design team. So if you wouldn't mind, or I'm sorry, Michael, would you like to tell everybody about this before we get started, before Sandino takes over?
Sure. This is a proposal for a 6-level parking garage on the current existing surface parking lot that's located in the middle of the block bounded by Northeast 2nd, North Walnut Avenue, East Main Street, and the BNSF Railway Viaduct on the west. There's been some developments on this that I need to advise the committee of with regard to the structure that's being proposed itself, separate from the issue of the variance. The structure that you have in your packet cannot be approved as shown in your packet. The applicant has informed me that there are some design considerations that need to be readdressed, and it's not physically possible to build the structure as it's shown and meet code. And therefore, you should not be able to take any action on the structure itself today. They have submitted revised plans as of yesterday to be considered at your next meeting on June 10th. So at best, what we're looking at for the actual structure, which would be item E1 in your staff report on page 3 of the staff report, would be a continuance on the actual structure itself. What we're looking at today, though, however, is because the project is slated for consideration of the variance before the Board of Adjustment on June 4th, we are seeking the ability of the committee to provide the Board of Adjustment with a recommendation on the variance request. So I'm going to run through the considerations on that aspect of the project for you in the staff report. And if the committee is comfortable acting on the variance without acting on the project, then they can go ahead and do so. So that being said, what we have here with respect to the variance request is that there's a minimum lot coverage requirement in the Bricktown Core Development District of 60%. This requirement is an offshoot, or it comes from the DDF, the Downtown Development Framework, which was adopted a few years ago, and pieces of it were incorporated into the Bricktown ordinance, some as regulation, other pieces as guidelines. In this particular regard, the minimum lot coverage was adopted as a regulation. With a lot that is 6.5 acres in size minimum, it's unrealistic and unreasonable, we believe, as staff, to require the project to be built at a 60% lot coverage. Right now, in its current form, the plans you have in front of you, the lot coverage is about 16.5%. We expect that to grow somewhat in the revised design, but it won't even come close to approaching the 60% minimum. Therefore, we have, in taking those items into consideration, staff believes it is appropriate to recommend approval of the variance. So with that being said, that completes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Okay. Are there any questions for the staff? And actually, let me before we go there, let me ask a few questions, Michael. So
Sure.
Is the applicant present to be able to speak on the project? I understand the sort of dynamics where we have two things. So one thing we wouldn't be able to vote on, but it seems like it may make some sense to take advantage, since we're all gathered, to at least be able to at least allow the committee to be able to ask some questions as they're appropriate, maybe on both items.
They are available when you call on them. They are on the line.
Okay, great, thank you. So for committee members, any further questions for Michael and the staff on this report? All right, seeing none, is the applicant available to speak on behalf of the project?
Jennifer, you can unmute yourself. Jennifer Horn.
Can you hear us now?
Yep, it's open. You're off.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Good morning.
Yeah,
I'm Jim Couch, and I represent Bank First on this project. And I'd like to give you a little bit of background about how we got here today, why we're here today. In the spring of 2018, Continental Resources was looking at their forward plans and realized that they had a lot of their employees parking in the in the Cox Center, and that with the opening of the new convention center, that the Cox Center would not be a long-term parking solution for them. So they approached the city to see if the city would sell the Santa Fe garage. Parallel to that, Bank First was looking at the Cotter Tower, Liberty Tower, Chase Tower, whatever you want to call it, which was in bankruptcy, and looking at the viability of purchasing that and making it their corporate headquarters. And as they were doing their due diligence, parking obviously became an issue to Bank First if they were going to take this tower on, which was about, 2/3 plus vacant. And they decided that they wanted to go forward with it because they wanted to consolidate their operations in downtown Oklahoma City, and they wanted to do something iconic to save the Liberty Tower. So they went through negotiations, bought the tower with the actually, they bought the tower after they bought the garages, but they bought the garage, the Santa Fe parking garage, in conjunction with Continental Resources. And then they also, because that wasn't enough parking for the ultimate needs of Continental Resources and full occupancy of the tower. And so they approached the city for also, when they bought the Santa Fe garage, to buy this parking lot in Bricktown with to build another parking garage on top of that to satisfy the ultimate needs of the tower and Continental Resources. And so as we're going through that process, but otherwise the tower wasn't feasible. They had to have parking to make it feasible. And so Bank First is consolidating their operations. Bank First will occupy the first 15 floors of the tower, and then the other tenants are now in the process of all moving up into the upper floors of the tower. The site itself is unique. It's complicated. It's old railroad siding, and it really doesn't have access on the west because of the BNSF railroad. It doesn't have access up on 2nd Street except for a little piece right off of the railroad. It's not on Main, although you can kind of see it from Main in a couple of areas. And on the east side, you can, if you look over the ledge of the Walnut Street garage, you can kind of see it. It's really tucked in between. And then to complicate matters, the city required their railroad easement go through really the heart of the property to accommodate a future project, which really, it really limits how the garage can be constructed, really limits a little bit the viability of the garage. That being said, it is viable, and we're right up against the railroad easements that's through there, but we need the additional parking to satisfy the needs of the tower, which is ultimately required to make the tower financially successful. And it's a very unique site. If you've gone down and looked at it, I hope some of you have, you're probably all pretty familiar with it. It's tucked behind. And with that, I think Jennifer wanted to talk to you a little bit about the specifics of the site.
So my name is Jennifer Horn. I'm with J.E. Dunn, who is the contractor on this project. When we have looked at this project and deciding the exact location of where we would locate the structure, we have it really tucked in, where on the north side, we are just barely below a utility easement. Just to the east and the southeast, we are just barely not touching the railroad easement. And we really can't get any further to the west. We've made a little modification at that area, but the new footprint that we will show in the next meeting show, we really can't get further over to that west to be able to stay out of all the railroad easements and the utility easements that are there. Currently, we're only taking up about 16.5% of the lot coverage. We did make it a little bit bigger in some of the modifications we would show you here in about 2 weeks' time, but that only increases us up to 17%. With that easement going through the middle of the building, or the lot, sorry, you really can't get any of the coverage. That coverage in that whole entire area would only take up to 25% of the whole entire lot, because it divides that whole entire lot into 2 sections. So we've really done our best to make it viable and to take up as much as we can of that footprint.
Everything that shows a railroad easement, that really,
It would have been nice to have that. If there's any other questions, we could take it now.
Okay, I have one question actually relative to staff really quickly, and then I'll open it up to the committee for questions for consideration. But it's just something I want to make sure that was clear about based on what we. So today, I understand that we wouldn't be able to take any action on the design itself. There are some revisions coming, so I might have a few questions and maybe others about that. So if the applicant's interested or willing, I think it would be great to talk about that, because we could kind of maybe get ahead of any comments or thoughts to the extent that it's practical. The question I have for the staff is, Michael, I think you were saying in regards to the variance, which we can take action on today, that this is the variance for site coverage. So I understand that this variance for site coverage is not, so we're not looking at variances for sort of any other kind of items in regards to some of the complicated, if you will, aspects of the site with regards to right-of-ways and things like that. It's just really for that idea of 60% coverage, right?
Yeah, actually, the applicants raised an excellent point that I neglected to cover in my staff report, and that is that it might not be possible to meet the 60% lot coverage simply because of the constraints that are that are established by all the easements that do crisscross this site. So that alone would probably, I think she mentioned, might limit it to 25% coverage at the most, at any rate, simply because of those easements that exist, both utility and railroad. So yeah, but that is in a nutshell what we're looking at today. It's only only a variance with respect to the minimum lot coverage requirement. We don't see anything in the design of the project itself that would require a variance at this point in time. And the plans that you will see are meeting 2 weeks hence on June 10th do not look anything substantially different than the plans you have here in front of you today. It's just going to be a slightly different building footprint for the project, going from 16.5% lot coverage to, I think, 17%, as Jennifer Horn had mentioned from the applicant's staff. So pretty much what you see in your packet today is what you're going to be looking at in a couple of weeks. It's just going to be some slight design tweaks and considerations to make the ramps and so on and so forth work internally on that project.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. That you kind of got to what I was curious and hinting at. So appreciate that, Michael. Okay, so for the applicant, Ms. Horn and others, are you all comfortable talking about, or at least receiving questions that to decide what you can answer in regards to the design, or would you just prefer for us to look at the variance? I think we can offer you that flexibility.
We would appreciate any questions at this time so that we can be able to do any tweaking we can between now and the next meeting.
Great. That was my hope as well. So appreciate it. So at this time, if there are any questions for the applicant from the committee.
I can get unmuted. I think I understand why the building is rotated at maybe a 30-degree angle. Was there I guess my question is kind of like future development to the south as it relates to Main Street. When a structure like this gets built, I would assume that some consideration sort of made to how it relates to future development around it. And just wondering if you could speak to the decision to rotate the building as opposed to having it maybe on a vertical 90-degree axis, because it looks like it could fit, but then again, there may be other easements in addition to what the city's requiring from the.
This is Jim Couch, and the key factor is not you can't see that's on there is there's a arcing railroad easement for the future expansion of the line off of the BNSF road that goes to the east. And it starts and it cuts right through the middle, and we're right up against it. It's immediately south. I mean, we're right up against it. We're just to the north of it by like 2 feet. And so that's what really disrupt. That was a city requirement, and it tremendously disrupts the site.
You bet, Jim. I appreciate you speaking to that. I'm very familiar with that.
Each corner is actually
whole
not squared like that.
But
Yeah, no, it's important to the future of the transit needs of Oklahoma City. And so we went into this with our eyes wide open that it was going to be there, and we understand it's right there. And it's important to the future transportation needs. It's really difficult for this site.
Yeah. And
really impacts the site.
I'm all in favor of the variance. I'm totally in support of it. I'm just curious if it, and I also realize we're looking at a graphic that's simplified.
Yeah. It can't move to the north. It can't move to the west. It can't move to the south. It is absolutely jammed in there.
I'm more just asking about the, rotation that right now it looks like it's at a 30-degree angle. And if it were at a 90-degree
That's correct.
angle, would it have fit? That's really my only question.
Richard, no, it won't. But let me pull together some information so that we can really show that at the next meeting. But between the easements, that easement really does cut it off. It actually, the simplification, we're not showing that southeast corner is not really a corner. We actually had to clip off that bottom part just to be able to fit into that easement and everything else. So we can't rotate at all, or we just continue to clip off that building.
Makes sense. No need to bring extra graphics. It's fine.
With the easement in there.
Okay. Any other committee members have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions real quick. And I apologize for the construction noise in the background. If you can hear it, it's a little bit loud. So I was wanting to ask about the item 2B within 6A. That was the covered pedestrian walkway. I didn't see any sort of illustrative account of that in the plans. I was wondering if you could talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, Brent, I think there's one exhibit in the packet you have that may show a glimpse of what that was going to look like. But with the changes to the structure you're going to see in the packet on June 10th, at this point in time, that will likely drop off as one of the components or one of the elements of this project for the time being. They may come back later with the revisions of the project once they've got the details of the alignment and configuration of that walkway figured out. At this time, they do not. So when you see this on your June 10th agenda, that item will probably not be included as part of the project.
Okay. Follow-up question to that is this garage going to be 100% employee used, or will it convert at night over to visitor use? How will that work?
Yes, it will be. This is Jim Couch again, and yes, it will be available for events, concerts, ball games, basketball games, baseball games, whatever happens. So yes, it will be available beyond employee use.
Okay.
Thank you. And if I can go back to the pedestrian crossing for a minute. That's actually was negotiated that would be a city requirement to build the crossing over Gaylord.
Okay.
And so after Park First finalizes their financing and has a construction contract in place and gives notice to the city then is charged of constructing that pedestrian connection, and we don't know where it's coming across at this point in time. So because of that, We don't know. It might go under, we just don't know where it's gonna be at this point in time. So any connection would be speculative at this point.
Okay. And I think I'm pretty much in Richard's camp. You know, I don't have any issues with the variance or the lot coverage. It's pretty clear why that is that way. I would challenge the design team to really think hard about how this site kind of integrates into the fabric of Bricktown, especially for that visitor experience. And to look at the ways that, you know, ingress and egress out of the actual structure and having ways that are very clear and defined and easy to move around to get in and out of the garage. You know, if there's anything that we've learned is, you know, right now it has this really important use for parking for the the Bank First Tower, but who knows, in 20 years this, you know, things could change, you know, and we want this parking garage to fit into that part of Bricktown and be really connected. So that's always one of those things that's not necessarily in the scope of the application right now, but with all you're dealing with, I'd like to throw a little bit more on your pile and kind of challenge to see if we can get this thing where it's really nicely integrated into the urban fabric if possible.
Thank you, noted.
All right. Any other committee members with questions for the applicant? Okay, let's see. Seeing none. So I have a few questions. I'm quite familiar with the lot as well, as I regularly cross it and make use of some nice tactical urbanism to get into the Deep Deuce area. So I think most of the questions have sort of been asked. I do want to, I think similarly, the variance is pretty straightforward. I mean, even without some of the constraints you guys mentioned, it makes sense. I think these are the reasons why variances are in place. So I think that part is pretty straightforward. I did have kind of maybe questions or comments about the interaction. And I think it would be helpful, maybe even just for posterity's sake, if in the presentation you guys could bring, or the presentation a couple of weeks, you could bring some kind of representation of the constraints. Again, I don't want to necessarily require or create an expectation. You spend a lot of time on that, but if you could create some representation just of the challenges, so we maybe kind of see how it fits. I'm imagining what you all are talking about, just being familiar with the site and its uses over time. But one of the things I am kind of curious, because I think, you know, this development, this garage has been obviously much talked about for years for a lot of different reasons. So I kind of would echo some of the previous comments about, you know, just thinking about how it factors into the fabric of Bricktown. I absolutely get the need for the project. I get the need, I get the use case and those kind of things. I think at one point might have thought the structure would be a little bit more massive, actually. So some of the questions I have is how much this design would lend itself to some adaptable either reuse or expansion in the future, be it with something going on top, or be it with development to the south, somehow either bridging over or interacting with any of the potential future multimodal connections that we might be looking at in regards to the railroad right-of-ways and things of that nature. So I am kind of curious about those from a design perspective, and maybe anticipating both the difficulties and also maybe, you know, the value, I think, of this site for where it sits in relation to Bricktown, Deep Deuce, and then obviously just east of the CBD. So if you could maybe speak to any thoughts you have about that, and then the question about if it would be possible to just show some representation in your presentation about the constraints that you're having on the site, just so we kind of have it to be able to see there.
Excuse me, this is Laura McDevitt in the city attorney's office, and I'm afraid we need to pause the meeting for just a second.
Okay.
are we doing? How is this possible?
Katie? Katie or Jennifer?
Yes,
Okay, so I was asked to jump on to assist in whatever way I can. I understand you're trying to take a vote or something along those lines.
Mickey, this is Laura McDevitt. Yeah, so the issue was that the materials they're available online, but not in the typical spot where the public might be able to find them. So I think we should just clarify for the public that the attachments and the staff reports and everything, you can click, if you pull up all of the the public meetings that the city holds, and you click view on the left of where the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting is listed, then all of the attachments are available, but there aren't the links in the typical spot on if you just go to the meeting itself. So we can go ahead and continue.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we're good? Okay,
We are good. I apologize for the delay. I just didn't want to have an Open Meetings Act violation.
Okay.
well, no problem. I am also not interested in presiding over a meeting that has Open Meetings Act issues, so I appreciate that. And Richard for being so kind as to display some of the attachments if necessary. Okay, so I think I was asking a couple of questions just for some feedback or response from the applicant. I'll repeat them just briefly. So my first question was just if at least for just representation and documentation in the next presentation, we could get some basic graphic representation or plan that shows the constraints that you all have run into with the various right-of-ways and easements and things of that nature that are blocking this site in. So that was one sort of request or question I had about the difficulty in pulling something like that together. And then the second question was really more in relation to the design and the thought about this particular project in relation to future use, either like say adaptive reuse or maybe future expansion or additional needs within the site. And it's really two-part. One, I mean, I think that is a fair consideration for structures like these in these areas. But I also think, secondly, that this site, for a lot of the reasons that some other committee members have mentioned, and its interaction with the different districts and things like that, particularly because it will likely be a place that draws a lot of public interaction. I think it's important at least to be thinking towards the future on how that interaction and that engagement with the streets and its location can be improved upon, or would even be able to be sort of built out upon. I mean, with other development, either going up vertically or expanding into the areas to the south. So those were my two questions about what's been presented here.
Richard, would you mind being so wonderful as to present that as well? I had thought that this sheet had gotten pulled out of the packet and everything else, so I'm really grateful that Richard is showing that. If you can see that radius that he is showing right through there, that is that railroad easement. So you can see we are really right there on top of it. If you actually look just to the north of it, thank you. Well, right there at the south, we can't get any further really south too much. We have that easement as well on the south. We have the railroad that's right there on the west, and then we have the utility there on the north and everything else. If you actually go through and do that square footage and that little space that we actually can build in, it's only about 25% of that whole entire lot. So getting into that little nook and space and everything else, I think, we've done a really good job on taking up that space and using it and everything else, and providing for the area, the parking that we need to help make the other areas viable and everything else. There'll definitely be a lot of, interactions and everything else that we're planning with that covered walkway. But again, we are waiting on the city to be able to finish up there so that we can correctly design that, so that we can interact with that. Just pulling people over from the other side of that railroad and everything else. Does that answer most of your questions, sir?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I get the point, and I was trying to figure out where that drawing came from. But actually, yeah, it sounds like we already have that information. So I appreciate that.
Sandino, I took a pen and highlighted. It's very faded, those representations of those easements, and so.
Okay.
For the record, it wouldn't be bad to have those darkened up a little bit in 2 weeks when we look at the overall. But there's
now I'm seeing it. Yeah, now I'm seeing it. Now that you mentioned it. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that would probably satisfy my my request, and it was just to make sure that was highlighted. And I think so now I can see what you did there, Richard. And yeah, if you guys could maybe just go over that. I mean, I think it would just help to clarify for us, but also again for the record for future sake, exactly what it is that you're contending with there. So it sounds like maybe insights on how the garage and the design of the garage would sort of interact, or at least be able to build on future interactions for pedestrians and for the public is to be determined.
I think, Jennifer, if we could have for the packet on the meeting on the 10th, the opportunities and constraints exhibit that's separate from some of the exhibits we have here already, that specifically focuses in on labeling and highlighting the locations of all those constraints. That would be really beneficial for all the committee members.
We will do that, sir.
I did have a question.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Were you done? Sorry.
No, I'm done. Actually, I was going to wrap up, so I'm happy that you chimed in when you did. So please go ahead.
I just had a question. Could you, if somebody in the committee clarified to me what was the vision behind the 60% minimum lot requirement?
That, again, as I had mentioned in the presentation, is rooted in the DDF, the Downtown design framework, or development framework document that was adopted, I think in 2016, 2017. And then when we last updated the Bricktown Core Development project, we had direction from management in the planning department to adopt some of those items in that document as regulation and other pieces as guidelines. This particular requirement, the minimum lot coverage, was directed to be brought in as a regulation. And I think in hindsight, the intent was to have this kind of a regulation apply more directly to the regularly shaped smaller lots that line the main streets throughout Bricktown. I don't think if we had our thinking hats on at the time that we did that, that we would have intentionally applied this regulation to such a large lot with an unusual configuration and numerous other constraints on it that are proposed or that are present from the easements that affect the site. I think having the benefit of 2020 hindsight, we might have gone back when we adopted this regulation and made an exception for lots like this, because clearly it's not reasonable to apply this regulation to a lot like this. But that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is we did not include an exception, and it does apply. And again, the intent, I believe, of the regulation was to apply mainly to the lots that are fronting on the primary streets that crisscross throughout Bricktown. This is not a lot that has a lot of frontage on any of the streets that surround it, and therefore it's a kind of a quandary. It's a little bit of an outlier parcel. It's not your standard run-of-the-mill type of a regulation in terms of applying to this type of a project or this type of a lot. So that's kind of the background of why the regulation existed. We're trying to ensure that we get a lot of intensity, a lot of floor area ratio on the projects that do front on the streets.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And just a follow-up to that. So my question is, so this yellow highlight that we see on the screen, is that the legal size lot? And would we be applying the variance to the entire lot? Or is that, how would that work for future development to the east, potentially?
The yellow line is the boundary of the subject parcel. There's a little bit of a access easement that goes down to East Main Street. It really comes down to how the Board of Adjustment implements or approves the variance, if they do approve it. Typically, variances run with the land, and they are permanent. There's no sunset clause in them, so it would apply. You know, if they do it as a standard run-of-the-mill approval, it would probably apply to the entire site. It's important to bear in mind, though, however, on the eastern frontage, that the lot is not at grade with North Walnut Avenue. That's all a bridge for this project frontage, so there's no direct pedestrian or vehicular access on that eastern frontage. So yeah, but generally speaking, the variance would be applied to the entire site.
And also on continued follow-up, and for the variance, I'm sorry, for the minimum lot requirement, is that was that applied only to structures, or is that for like the build out for the entire lot, meaning landscaping and everything else, or is it just saying 60% minimum lot requirement of a structure or of anything else?
It's a lot coverage is based on structures.
Okay.
This is Laura McDevitt, and I just wanted to interject for some clarification. Typically, variance applications are limited to what is actually stated in the application. So if they provide a site plan, the variance would be limited to that, and it wouldn't necessarily be able to be adjusted over time without going back and forth.
Thank you. And just a final thought on question was there any, I saw on the package that they're going to be reconstructing some of the surface parking lot. Is that what is going to be done to the east side, or is there
No.
I'm sorry?
No, it's the areas of the existing surface parking lot that would be reconstructed would be only those areas immediately surrounding the proposed parking structure. There's no, I think to the east, there's no reconstruction of that parking lot anywhere past maybe 100 feet away from the east side of the building. They're just going to reconfigure the existing parking lot areas that surround the proposed parking structure so that they will tie in to the fabric and circulation pattern of the existing surface parking lot. So once you get, 100 feet or so away from all four sides of the parking structure, there would be no reconstruction or redesign of those areas.
Okay, and I would just also like to throw out there that I don't know if it was Sandino or maybe Brent that brought this up. I'm just thinking about, since we are creating a 6-level parking structure and increasing the amount of traffic into that small area, I just think it would be wise to consider just the pedestrian connections for even the people that are surface parking, just for safety around the area. So I also have just kind of a thought and concern about that design, or and maybe it's already thought out through. I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, we have been working with the applicant throughout this process to ensure that they provide an emphasis on not only vehicular access to and from the structure, but also the pedestrian access, highlighting those locations where people that are approaching the structure would be easily able to see where they can access the elevator and stairway towers in the parking structure and be able to find their way to and through the structure.
Okay. Billy, you have any other questions?
No, that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay. I don't know if it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So I think at this time, it sounds like what we would need is a motion to continue the first item, and then let's see here. So that would be the item 6A, and then we would need for item 6A, we would want to continue the vote on the design, and it looks like we could vote on item 6A5. We could take action on item 6A5, and we would need to continue all the other items associated with 6A. Is that accurate, Michael? Or
no? If you go to the bottom page 3 of your staff report, there's a staff recommendation there. We have item E1A, and that's actually the vote on the project, and then item E2 is the recommendation on the variance request. So I think what we're looking for here from the committee, and the applicant is probably also requesting, would be a continuance recommendation or a vote of continuance on item E1. Okay. And then to continue on after that, if the committee is comfortable providing a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on the variance, that they can go ahead and take an action or a vote on item E2.
Okay, so great. So first thing I would want to do is entertain a motion for item E1.
I'll make the motion. It seems complicated, but I move that we continue item E1.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, I'm waiting for it to come up on the PrimeGov thing.
Apologies, give me 1 second to add the motion in PrimeGov.
No problem.
I apologize, Jennifer, here, one more time. Can I get a motion declared again? Who was the motion and who was the second, please?
This is Richard McCown. I'm move that we,
Continue.
I don't even remember what I'm trying to do here. I move that we continue item E1. Is that?
Yes.
Sandino nods in affirmation.
And this is Ophelia Cancio, and I second that.
Thank you. I have noted McCown motion to continue 6E1 and Officio to second. I'm having a little bit of difficulty in PrimeGov capturing that motion.
Okay, Jennifer, what's it showing you on the screen?
It's showing a recommended is highlighted.
And you're wanting to change it to the deferred one?
Correct.
Okay, so click on the motion on the agenda side and then go over to the clerk side, and at the very top, you should have a like a Ghostbuster symbol where you can deactivate it. And then if you double click back on the item, it should allow you to make a new motion. Okay, you're clicking in the actions instead of the motions.
Okay, I see that I'm in the motions tab now. I'm so sorry.
So are your quick motions highlighted where you can click one?
No.
All right, give me just a second for you, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, click on the item itself, double click the item so that it's activated.
Okay,
Now
now
click the quick motion.
Okay.
And then click the
got
call
it.
for movers button and go ahead and put in the motion, the person that moved it, clicked their name, and then click the person that seconded. I don't see the quick motion yet. Okay, you clicked recommended again.
Oh,
It looks like we have it.
All right, perfect. Now if you'll just click open vote, they should get the voting buttons.
All right.
And then when everybody has voted, if you'll click close vote, the results will appear on the screen.
Committee Member Wall,
Yes.
would you cast your ballot in PrimeGov,
Yes.
please?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you guys for your patience.
No problem. Okay, so it looks like that vote passes. I would now like to entertain a motion for item E2 of the staff recommendation. And this is providing the approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance of the minimum lot coverage.
I'll go ahead and move to recommend the Board of Adjustments approve the variance request.
You got to click that button then, Richard.
Okay.
I'll
Do
second.
we have a second? Great. Okay. All the members can vote, please. All right, looks like this item has also passed. Okay, so that's all for this item on the agenda, and I believe I'll defer to Laura or other staff, but I think I can turn this back over to the chairwoman.
You did all the hard work, Sandino.
It's been real.
Okay, so moving on to item 6B, cases for individual consideration, BCA 24. Michael, would you like to tell us about this item?
Sure. This is an application for a projecting sign on the north face of the building that houses the melting pot. They're proposing a sign, projecting sign on that north elevation. We have highlighted this one for your consideration in that we have design guidelines for Bricktown that suggest the letter size in signs in Bricktown should not be greater than 12 inches. The letters in this sign are, I believe, somewhere close to, well, they're probably around 27 to 28 inches tall, and we've brought this for you for that reason. We are generally in support of the sign itself and the sign location and the sign being on that north elevation. However, we do feel in our staff report we've laid out for your considerations, and we do feel that the sign proposed as is at 21 feet tall is too large for this facade, out of proportion scale with the building. It takes up nearly 40% of the overall building height, and we feel strongly that a smaller size sign would be a more appropriate implementation of the sign program. We want to try and alleviate and control sign clutter and make sure that the signs would get approved here in Bricktown are in appropriate proportion and scale with the buildings that are mounted onto. Therefore, we have recommended approval of this sign with the condition that the height of the sign be reduced from 21 feet as proposed to a maximum of 15 feet with proportional reductions in the sign width and lettering size. That concludes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Is anyone here to speak on this on behalf of the applicant today?
Yes.
Okay.
Dustin Aki is on the line, prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Okay. So do we have any questions from the committee, or would anyone like to hear anything from the applicant before any questions are asked?
If the applicant has a presentation or wants to talk about the request or maybe even the size, since there's a little difference in opinion, I'd be happy to hear that.
Dustin, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hey, this is Sean with GNS Signs, and Dustin is with me here in the room. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand your guys' concerns, but we are in favor with just a little bit larger letters, just for visibility and readability from the street. That sign, it's right next to the railroad, and there's also a few trees, so it's a little bit taller. So we went through a little bit bigger letter, but also on the very bottom, Melting Pot likes to keep their brand, and that tagline, if we go smaller, you won't be able to read it. So I understand the concerns, but all I'm asking for is maybe to reconsider, maybe come up with a compromise, maybe somewhere in the middle. There are other signs that are close by on Reno that we did, Riley Permian, and I believe that sign is about 18 foot, 6 inches tall, and the letters are a little bit larger as well, and its readability is right. It's on the same size building as well, the height-wise. But if there's any questions, willing to help.
I've got a thought for you guys. I really like the way that the bottom of the sign lines up with the bottom of the window, the bottom of the window on the second floor. So if you lowered it just ever so slightly to line up with the head of the window on the third floor, it might make a nicer proportionate relationship. I didn't scale all this out. Certainly what I'm showing here is taller than 15 feet, but it's less than 21. So that might be the logic of squeezing it a little bit, but I am sensitive to the idea that making the tagline at the bottom too small could be a challenge. How big are those letters at the bottom?
They're about 5-6 inches. So if we scale it down to 15 foot tall by 2.5 foot wide, you're going to cut those in half. You're going to be probably 2 to 3 inches. You're barely going to see them.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of like that cornerstone sign that's up there. It's really hard to read, and I don't know if this really helps the case, but we are actually removing that sign as well, that cornerstone.
Okay. And
is there a way to leave that bottom part of the sign the same width it is right now, but just reduce the melting pot portion of the sign in height? In other words, leave the bottom of the sign the same width it is right now, but narrow up the upper portion of the sign.
I thought about that too. That might be a good solution if the tagline is really sounds like it's very important.
That's, yeah, we could do that, and we could scale it down to say maybe the sign being around 18 foot.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm just guessing, but it's probably somewhere around 18.6 if you squeezed it a little bit across the top, or to where it lined up with that window head. It's a really good looking sign.
Yeah, so I had a couple of thoughts to add to that. I think I would, because this is going away a little bit from the guidelines that we have in place, I would really be probably more in favor of Richard's suggestion, because it's an alternative sort of to the guidelines versus an exception to them. And that might be a really subtle distinction, but I think he's suggesting some symmetry there that and some scale there that sort of kind of changes the dynamic a little bit versus just saying that, you know, we're going to change the height requirement or sort of make an exception to the height requirement. And I do get concerned about precedents for these kind of things because signage is a big part of the sort of fabric of what we try and consider with these buildings and in the district. And so I think an alternative kind of approach of saying, okay, well, if we're not going to follow these guidelines, let's look at a different benchmark for scale makes a lot of sense. So I would be a lot more, I think, supportive of, instead of designating the height, talking about that scale sort of consistent with maybe with what he was suggesting, being an alternative, and then maybe slimming up and scaling if you need that bottom portion to be a little wider, that would still seem to make some sense.
I agree with that. I think that is a nice alternative solution.
Yeah, we have talked about this in the last sign that came up under this guideline over there on East Main Street. This is a guideline that presumes that 12 inches in height, letter height is sufficient for any and all signs in any condition on any building anywhere in Bricktown. We discussed when that one came up before the committee that that's probably not a good way to go, one size fits all for everything. So I think that we're open to the idea of having letters that are larger than 12 inches on this sign. We're also not concerned at all with the maximum size of the sign. The size that's been presented to you at 21 feet is within the maximum size area for signage on this facade of the building. So that's not an issue either. So there's no variance required for the maximum square footage of the sign. We're only talking about it, reducing it from the perspective of it being somewhat out of proportion or out of scale with the overall height of the building, and being, you know, not in character with the pedestrian orientation of the signs that is encouraged through the guidelines, because you do have a lot of pedestrian traffic here, and we don't want something that's really large kind of looming over that pedestrian pathway along Sheridan. So that's why we've suggested a reduction in the overall height. We understand there's a need to maintain readability. Obviously, the lower part of the sign is critical to the applicant, and we believe that part of the sign can remain the width that it is proposed at. We just feel like the height overall from 21 feet needs to be reduced to something a little bit smaller and more in proportion with the building and the scale of the pedestrian pathway along Sheridan there.
I'll ask a question here. I see in the rendering that's been provided where we see the new signage proposed, there's a black band. Is that going to be painted on in addition to what this application is doing, and then removing of the existing melting pot sign? I know you said the cornerstone sign is being removed.
The black band from, I mean, this was at first, that's what we wanted to do. It's just, I don't know if it is allowed. I know I see it on other buildings around there, but I've heard a little bit of kickback on that. So I'm not, I mean, I'd like to do the black band if the committee would allow, but that's completely different. Completely different than the sign.
So that's not part of this application?
No, that's not this one.
But so would the, even though that's not part of this application, then does that mean that the existing melting pot that's on over the main door entry would be removed, and just this new
Yes.
flag sign being coming up? Okay.
Absolutely.
I think I hear a lot of the committee is saying that, yes, we agree the sign's a little too large for what it is, but we're all agreeing with the proportions that Richard proposed, that the sign is bound on the bottom side by the second story sill, I'll say, that bottom part of the window, with the top of it being bound by the third floor header of the window to put it into a closer proportion that feels appropriate for the building. Does that summarize what everyone's really thinking?
Very good.
Okay. So do we need to, are we ready to make a motion for approval with, let's see, how do we phrase this? With the condition attached to it?
Yeah, we would have to have somebody make a motion with a new condition that's different than the one in your staff report at the bottom of page 5. And whoever makes the motion would have to stipulate the limits of the size of the sign that they're trying to establish with through this discussion, I guess.
Are we all agreeing that, Richard, your idea is the good idea?
You want me to try and put this into a
Yeah,
motion?
I think that would be great.
Did you calculate a number that you thought? Did I hear 18 feet somewhere a bit ago?
No, this isn't.
So yeah, I mean, I might suggest that the number might be less relevant than the instruction, because I think you'll settle on the number that fits within those two lights.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, Kasha, I think you said it really well. I would like to move that we approve the sign with the constraint to maintain the bottom of the sign at the bottom of the windowsill of the second story and bring the top of the sign down to the height of the window header of the window at the third story.
I would second that.
All right.
Oh, I got to hit the button. I'm still trying to do the calculation in my mind.
Let it go. Let it go.
Just don't do it.
Hey, and Avis, you have to second it.
Yes, I had the second.
Oh, no. So yeah, you'll have to push the button too.
Oh, sorry. But it's not, it's spinning.
Uh-oh.
It's buzzing around.
There we go.
Why am I? Do I need view options? I don't see anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was able to vote, but it said, would you still like to second the motion? I'm not sure if we got something going on. There we go. Well, Sandino seconded, so he stole it from you there, Avis.
Oh, Sandino.
Okay, so motion passes with the condition that the new sign proportions will be bound by the sill of the second floor window and the header of the third floor window. Thank you very much, applicants, for working with us on that and making something that really fits to the needs of Bricktown.
I didn't see where the vote displayed on the screen.
Excuse me, Laura?
I didn't see where the vote displayed. I saw the motion in the second, but I didn't see the vote tally.
There was no vote.
Oh, somehow I had a vote tally. I don't know how I got ahead of everybody.
So
it popped up for me too.
Yeah, we would just need to do a roll call vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a
Well,
roll?
and Avis can have the second as well if we can let the record reflect.
Hi, this is Jennifer Swan here. Laura, does that mean you prefer a roll call vote at this time?
Well, we either need to show on Zoom what the vote tally was, or we need to do a roll call vote. But either way, it just needs to be clear in the record.
Okay. I have McCown as a motion with approval with a condition, and Avis as second. I'll now do a roll call vote. Committee Member McCown?
Yes.
Committee Member Scaramucci?
Yes.
Committee Member Thompson?
Yes.
Committee Member Cancio?
Yes.
Committee Member Wall?
Yes.
Okay, that is all ayes for this motion. The motion carries. Laura, is that sufficient?
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so that moves us to item 7 in our agenda today, other business. There's none. Item 8, communications, administrative approval report. Michael, is there anything you need to tell us about these approval reports?
No, nothing really earth-shattering here. You see a couple at the end, 4 and 5, of some of the new small cell poles that are proliferating throughout the city. And then we have a ATM and vending machine, and then some minor revisions to the building on the west side of Oklahoma Avenue between Sheridan and Main. And then some revisions that were approved to the building where the old spaghetti factory is going to go in there at Sheridan and Mickey Mantle. So those have all been approved administratively or in effect at this time.
Okay, great. Let's see, 8B, any comments from planning department staff? I guess you've already covered those then, Michael, or is there anything else?
No, we have no items from staff.
Okay.
This is Katie Friddle with Planning Department, Principal Planner for Current Planning and Urban Design. Michael, I was going to jump in with something that we didn't get on the agenda, just some little updates for everyone. 2 things. One, starting in July, we anticipate distributing meeting packets for all of our design committee meetings electronically only. This is to, jump ahead to the 21st century and also save some trees and save some paper and some money. If you have questions, concerns about that, let staff know, but we'll try and make that as seamless a transition as possible. The other thing we wanted to let you know is that yesterday at City Council, an item was introduced to revise fees for applications for design review districts. These haven't been updated in 10 or so years and are heavily subsidized by the city when you compare the fees to the cost it is to actually run all of these design districts and programs. And we can send you a link to see that information, but it'll go back to council 2 more times before it's implemented. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay. Comments from committee members? Is there anything else that we need to talk about here today? Yes, Dandino.
I got one that's just real quick. I've had the fortune or maybe the misfortune of having to do a couple of these meetings. And so I just want to commend the city staff for rolling with the punches. I know it probably seems a little embarrassing, frankly, for you guys sometimes to have to deal with technology and things not working. And I think, you guys have done a commendable job given everything that's going on with the health pandemic and the other challenges that we've been facing. So I just, since this is the first time we met in a while, I felt like it was a good time to just mention that. And as a citizen of Oklahoma City, give my thanks for you guys' efforts in keeping these mechanisms of government rolling. So I appreciate it.
Second that.
Second that.
And they're doing a great job for sure.
Yes, thank you.
Miss all you guys.
Okay, doesn't look like there's comments from anybody else. Somehow I lost my gallery view. So if you need to pipe up, now's the chance because I can't see you all at once. Okay, that sounds like it's it. Second to last item on the agenda, next meeting will be June 10th. That looks like we're definitely having it to continue part of our discussion here today. And with that, at 10:24, it looks like meeting's adjourned unless there's any other questions.
That's it.
Okay, great job, everybody. Thank you so much for participating and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Meeting
Thank
adjourned.
you.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Katie, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know
You got my seat.
what the issue was. I talked to Mickey and she said that we will have to add Francis to the meeting invite.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's no trouble. I just didn't know we were supposed to do it because he joined us on his own the last time, so I thought he was monitoring it.
Right.
Not us, but that's no big deal.
Okay. All right, we'll be set up for this afternoon's meeting. Fine then.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.